name is Jordan Fillers, and this is Nobody Cares What You Have to Say News. And today I am interviewing, what's your name again?
My name is Chris Fillers.
It's my dad. And I'm going to interview him about 9/11. That's September 11th, 2001. Okay, so you ready to get started?
Sure.
Wait, what was your age on September 11th, 2001, and where were you?
I guess I was 30 years old at the time, and I was at work downtown Chattanooga at a place called, two places I guess you'd say. It was called Classic and Sports Collectibles.
All right. How did you first learn about the attacks?
I got to work that morning. I don't really remember exactly what time it was, but as soon as I walked into my office. I remember I was laying my bag down, and one of the guys named Reg Smith, he hollered from the other office for me to come in there, and the first plane had hit at that point. So that was how I first heard it. He was watching it on TV. I don't know if he saw it on TV that morning because he had a TV in his office, or he heard it on the radio or what. But he had just seen it, and it had just happened a few minutes before that.
Okay. At first, what did you think was happening when that happened?
To be honest, the first thought was there was a really bad pilot. I mean, seriously, because I look at most everything as a funny way to look at things, and so he and I were talking, and we were trying to figure out how could someone be that bad of a pilot. That you want, where they, because at first you had no idea nobody knew what type of plane it was. They weren't saying it on the news that it was some huge plane carrying a bunch of people. So when you first heard plane, you're thinking one of these little small planes that's just flying around, maybe giving tours or something like that, to where they're showing people around. And that was our first thought, is maybe it's some sort of plane and they just weren't looking, or maybe a big gust of wind caught it and blew it into the building or something. So we had no idea, but it was, you had no idea because all you were getting was what was on the news, and all you could see on the news was smoke coming from the side of the Trade Center.
Awesome. Awesome. Anyway, moving on to the next question, if that's okay. How did you react immediately following the news, physically and emotionally? And do you remember being scared?
Well, there were stages. On the first stage, this is what a lot of people don't understand. When you look back at it as a historical time, you're looking at the day as a snapshot. But see, it all happened gradually. The first thing it was, Reg calls me into his office. He says, hey, a plane just hit one of the trade centers. But, in World Trade Center, you've never been there. But, you're from Chattanooga. If you took the largest buildings of downtown Chattanooga and stacked them all up together, you still wouldn't have a building near as big as the Trade Center. It was an absolutely massive beast of a building. I mean, you couldn't even hardly see the top. Look, if you were standing down at the bottom and looking up, you wouldn't hardly even be able to see the top. Okay? This is a huge, huge building. And so for a plane to hit it, you were shocked because, like I say, you're thinking, okay, he's a terrible pilot or something like that, and you're getting distracted. But then when the second plane hit it, you still, even at that point, we were going, man, what in the world's going on? And we were thinking, well, maybe this other plane was flying around giving another tour, and this idiot flew into the building also, because you didn't know. You had no idea the size of the planes. And so, commercial airliners, they weren't flying through a big city like that because you wouldn't want to run into a building. So you had no idea what was happening, and it was real surprising. We were in there, and it was right after we saw the second one happen, and you're like, what the crap? And it was a big explosion, and you're thinking, my gosh, was this guy looking at the other one? And really, the word terrorist wasn't even in our head, and so. It was a bad thing going on and everything, and we were talking about it and talking to a couple other people that had come into work at the time. But then the Pentagon was hit. When the Pentagon was hit, it got scary. And even to this day, when I think of it, it's nerve-wracking. Because what Reg said, he said, Chris, come in here, hurry. So I ran in there, and he said, they just hit the Pentagon. The Pentagon is the largest building in the world. the Pentagon is the heart of the U.S. military, which, as far as I'm concerned, could whoop any and all other countries in the world at any time at once. Okay? So, for anyone to even have the thought to attack the Pentagon was much bigger than anything that we could have ever imagined from the trade centers, because that's your military. You know, that's like, you know, punching the big world champion in the face. That was a stupid move. But at the same time, we were blind and we had no idea where it had come from. You know, and at this point, they're speculating. Every channel that was putting stuff up, you couldn't keep up with what was going on. I remember getting online and some of the craziness just online, all the speculation. So I'll let you go. I'm probably going too far, but we'll come back on it if we have to.
How did 9/11 affect your feelings about the U.S.?
It made me more patriotic. I considered myself a patriotic person all through high school and everything like that, and I was big into anything that would support our country, especially our military and things along that line. I've always been what I consider a conservative person, and you know, when the attack happened, and you started figuring out that it was terrorist, and you knew some of the things that a lot of these people believed and everything, it just made me even more so want to stand by a lot of the principles that our country is known for.
Do you think Americans have changed in any positive ways as a result?
I think that in some ways this is a positive thing, and in some ways this is a negative thing. People, it's a shame that we live in a world that you don't feel like you can trust other people. That's not a good thing. But at the same time, it made us open our eyes and to figure out we don't live in as nice of a world as we would hope to live in. And so, you know, so some things that there's a lot of security things that you have to deal with now. And, you know, we just went on a trip, and, you know, we're going through, and I remember we were in line next to some people, and they were talking about how severe it seemed like some of the security measures were and everything. But, you know, I was patted down and stuff like that. You know, I went through, and I think I had a button on my shorts that had gone through, and, you know, of course they come through and they're frisking you and all that and running the wand over you, and, you know, you've already stood in a big thing with your arms over your head, and they're doing an x-ray of you and all this other stuff. But that's the world you live in now. And so, you know, some people get upset about the inconveniences, but it's a safety issue. I don't have a problem with it. Yeah, sometimes I think it takes a little longer, and I think I'm not sure that I would really necessarily open my eyes and look at the little old man that can barely stand up and walk. I'm not sure that I would bother patting him down. But then you got, you know, other guys over here in biker jackets or, you know, things like that you would look at it and you would say that's the stereotypical guy. But, you know, I went on a mission trip one time, and they patted down the little old man. That was part of my mission trip group. They patted him down, and head to toe. And this is just right after 9/11. And I'm like, well, that's just weird. Why would they pat him down? But now the friend of mine that was with me, that we were going on this mission trip, he was the pastor's son. He had a leather jacket on, jeans, biker boots. This guy had, you know, the stereotypical biker-looking guy, tattoos and all this other stuff. They didn't pat him down. Now, they didn't have the same screenings as they have today, and they may have patted him down today because this is just shortly after everything. But the guy did have a big old knife in his boot, and he did get on the plane with the big old knife in his boot. It was a rubber knife that he had gotten while he was in the Marines. It was a really hard plastic, but it was just as strong and just as dangerous as a real knife. But I think about things like that. There's no way with the security measures you've got today that wouldn't have shown up on a scan, because that would show up on the body scans now. It didn't even have to be metal. So, but yeah, there's been some things that have changed, and some for the better.
How about any negative ways, or what are some positive/negative ways, impacts that came about as a result of the attacks?
people will look at other people sometimes and will start to try to make a stereotypical judgment on something about a person. And that's not a good thing to do that right off to everyone, okay? But at the same time, there's something called common sense, okay? And, you know, you have to look at your history. We learn from our history, okay? We know the people that in history have been the ones that have done things like 9/11, okay? And 90 something or 98% of them were all of certain nationalities. And so for someone not to be looked at a little bit more strenuously because they are part of a certain nationality, that would be silly, okay? Now you have politics today, and you have people that are really get upset about that today, and they say they say that that's a bad thing, and that's not treating people right and everything. And I get that, and I understand that, and I'm not saying you treat someone with disrespect, but at the same time, if I'm taking my family on a flight and I'm using some common sense, there's going to be some certain people that I would raise my eyebrows up a little bit more than others. That happened to me this week. There were some people on the plane that I would have looked over, and I just have to trust that the security people did their job, you know, and I hope that they would. You know, the thing is, there's no security program that's perfect. There's things that you could get through, yeah, all day long. And so, you know, there's some things that are good that's happened. You know, I hope that people are smart and they do open their eyes. But there's a lot of things that people forgot. The big thing right after 9/11 happened, you saw it on every bumper sticker, it seemed like. There was a sticker that went around. They sold millions of it. It says, "We will never forget." This is 2018, and people have forgotten. Because you guys, they're, you know, come up seniors in high school, you have no idea what happened that day. You have no idea. You guys have not experienced anything that was that scary. As a matter of fact, I've never experienced anything that was that scary. And so it's a shame that people have forgotten the common sense that should have come from something like that. And for a while it was good. Now I'm not saying you should ever treat anybody bad, but what I'm saying is your eyes should be open to things that are obvious.
Okay. Can you describe the tone of the country in the days that followed?
People were very scared. People were looking to see what was next. In my lifetime, my dad was what I would definitely consider a very manly man, never was scared of anything. And 9/11 was the only thing I ever saw him scared about. He came in, he was at a nursing home visiting a guy that used to work for us, and they saw the second plane hit, and then he and my brother, they were there with this guy Reese, and they came back to the office real quick, and they came in, and Dad was talking to my mom on the phone, and he came in there just after a little while, and he said, "Hey, I need to go," and you could tell Dad was shaking, and he said, I'm gonna go home and be with your mom. She's real nervous that they're gonna hit Oak Ridge next. Oak Ridge is a nuclear plant, and not that far away. I mean, it's a good ways away, but if something were to get hit there, we'd have fallout. We'd have problems even coming from here. And of course, you got TVA here and stuff like that. But that was a fear. Everybody was scared that nuclear plants were going to be hit next. Because I mean, you're talking, you know, you just didn't know. And so it was, you know, with all the things with the airplanes, you don't realize how many airplanes are up in the air. But there are thousands and thousands of airplanes at any 1 second up in the air, just over the U.S. And the president said, "Land them all now." When the president says it, you do it. And so every airport, everywhere, was packed full of airplanes. And there was millions and millions of people stuck at airports all over the place. People were scared to death to do anything, sporting events, all kinds of things. They were trying to decide, are we going to still have those things? You know, we went to a concert right after, I guess it's in September. I can't think of when it was, but I want to say it's the latter part of September. That went just a few weeks later, and we were nervous when we went to this. It was a concert up in Louisville, Kentucky area, and it was nerve-wracking even at that point. So I mean, but it was like that for a long time. Everything that you saw, and then you know, when we started getting an idea of who it was, then military was already saying, hey, we're going to go out and, we're going to stop these people. But this was different because you're dealing with people and not a nation. And so you had people that had a certain belief system. Well, these people could be anywhere. They could be people that live next door to you. They could be people that you go to school with. They could be people that live in other countries. But we didn't know who they were because they were all people that just had a certain belief system, and most of it was that they hated the U.S. And it's still that way. There's a lot of them that really just hate the U.S. because of what we stand for. And so it was a scary time. And some of the things, a lot of stuff that happens today, it's still out of that fear, but fear is not always a bad thing. Fear is something that can help you be stronger and help you to be wise, and it should help you open your eyes.
Mm-hmm. How did your personal life change after 9/11?
We looked a little bit more when it came to the security measures that we had, when it came to the way that what we did when we traveled. And some of it had, because we would carry a lot of valuable products and stuff like that and everything, but it wasn't like anything that a terrorist or anybody else would want. But it was something, these were baseball cards and jewelry. And so that type of stuff, though, but we would have to watch the way that we pack things. We would, because there would be certain things that we would do. It could, you didn't want to pack things that looked as solid because they were telling us at that point, hey, they're going to search your luggage and they're going to pull stuff out. Well, we didn't want anybody searching our stuff because, if you've got a ball card in there that's worth $1,000, some guy searching your bag, they could just take it out and stick it in their pocket. Thank you very much. So it was, financially it was nervous for us, and it was also because the business that we were in was supported by people having extra money around, and this was something people were not spending their money at all. Business basically stopped, and so that was scary because it affected our whole family.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a little different.
How did other countries react to the attacks, and how did 9/11 affect your opinion of other countries?
I don't recall specific countries, but the majority of the countries, especially allies, but even other countries, that I guess they're technically allies, but they're not one. There's not like it's France and Germany and those or whatever. But some smaller countries, everybody was showing their support, basically saying that that this was bad and stuff like that, and just speaking out against it and everything. And they didn't know what was going on either. So immediately you had leaders from other countries calling President Bush and letting him know that that they're with us at whatever we need. That they're with us and stuff. And so that's encouraging anytime you get that. And you realize a lot of that's just political talk and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's not. There's people that were praying for us all over the world, and it was something. It was such a big thing. Is one thing that people don't think about when something like this happens. It stops the entire world, and this really did stop the entire world. And it's one of the few things that's ever happened that's like that. Matter of fact, but this was a larger event. This, to me, was a bigger event than even when the space shuttle Columbia exploded years ago. I know when I was in middle school, I think, and the Challenger exploded years later. Or a lot of people might remember when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Some people talk about when Elvis died.
Mm-hmm.
None of those events were as large as this. This was like Pearl Harbor, basically. This is basically like when Pearl Harbor happened in 1941. This would be our equivalent of that because it stopped the entire world. And there's not many things that have a chance to do that.
Mm-hmm. Do you fear another attack? And why? And do you think 9/11 could have been prevented?
Do I fear another attack? I don't fear another attack. But at the same time, I believe there will be other attacks. I think that the world that we live in is not getting better. It's getting worse. I think that I'm surprised that we haven't had more attacks already. I'm very surprised about that. I think that at some point we're going to see some sort of nuclear bomb go off in a large city. I hope it doesn't happen, but it's just the world we live in. And there's people that have access to stuff like that they shouldn't have it, but they have it. And, there's people that hate the U.S., that speak out against the U.S., that are, if they don't have their hands on it right now, they may have it soon. And so, I'm not fearful of it, but at the same time, I think it'd be silly to not think that it's probably going to happen. What was the other part of that question?
Do you think 9/11 could have been prevented?
Anything's, people say hindsight is 20/20, and you look back at what the government was supposedly told before 9/11 and things like that. Look, you got to step back and you got to think of the tens of thousands of reports that probably the FBI or CIA or all these government agencies, they get all the time about all different stuff. And people today are a lot more, I guess you'd say, paranoid than they were back then. Okay, so there's probably even more that's reported today. Okay, but at that time, yeah, they may have had some reports that certain things were happening or whatever, but, there's so much. If I report something to you, and then you have to report it to someone else, then that person has to report it to someone else, and it goes down the line 20 or 30 hands before somebody can actually see it that's going to be able to say, oh, well, we should probably do something about this. There's no way that you can prevent it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just, it's a shame that it's like that, but I don't think that they could have prevented it. I mean, they look back and they say, well, they knew certain things. When you know certain things, but it's in a pile of 1,000 things, you don't really know squat.
Mm-hmm.
So that's I don't think they could have done anything about it.
Okay. My last question is, how do you feel now when you talk about 9/11?
It's nerve-wracking. It brings back a lot of memories. I had a friend that she was, I guess across the river, or across the water, where and she was supposed to be working in the Trade Center that day, and she was on the phone with a friend of hers that was working at another building that was right across the street from the Trade Center, and he was looking out the window and he was seeing people jumping or falling out of the buildings and was screaming and crying and stuff like that. And that was a conversation she was having with her friend while she was watching it, because she was stuck in traffic, and she was one of those people that's always late to everything she was going to, and so she was late to work that day, but that may have saved her life.
Mm-hmm.
Being late. So she doesn't talk about it to this day, and I think that a lot of people are that way. I enjoy thinking back on things because it just brings back some memories. I'm not going to say, even though they're bad memories of something that's bad that's happened, it's something interesting. I like history, and so stuff like that. I like to look back, and I try to think of how. I don't think people, they don't get how big of a deal that was,
Mm-hmm.
and it was as big of a deal as there's ever been.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for this interview, and we'll see you next time.
I'll be watching it on TV.